is like the most influential movie we've ever talked about. I mean, it's in the running, right? I mean, Night of the Living Dead's got to be up there. I mean, obviously Eraserhead, but Eraserhead, like nobody tried to copy it, really. You can't copy Eraserhead or Pink Flamingos, but like everyone tried to copy this one.
Yeah, it's hard to say for sure, but it definitely is up there because this spawned a whole decade at least of slasher movies. So like it's still going on to this day, but it basically, like, I think Amy Nicholson in Halloween Unmasked put it as it spawned so many movies about killers that it kept growing until it killed itself.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah. It's weird to say that everybody knows who Michael Myers is as much as they know who like any movie character is. Yeah. Jesus. Maybe not as many as Jesus.
Santa
He's pretty
Claus.
Popular, but getting up there.
James
At least
Bond.
Maybe James Bond.
I'm just naming fictional characters.
Yeah, I was gonna try to lower the bar a little bit. I was just gonna be like, like at least as much as, I don't know.
Dom Toretto.
Yeah. Now that's the movie the world needs, is Dom Toretto versus Michael Myers.
Michael Myers wouldn't stand a fucking chance.
I especially want to see it in a car race.
Yep. He knows how to drive.
Michael knows how to drive.
So. All right, let's get going.
Oh, yeah. I forgot now.
Wait, I thought you were just psyching yourself up.
Well, what are we doing now? Well, hello. Welcome to Cinema Shock. It's the show that digs deep into the stories behind your favorite cult and genre movies. I'm one of your hosts, Gary Horn.
And I'm your other host, Justin Bishop. So last week on the show, we traced the origins of Halloween, how John Carpenter and Deborah Hill transformed a vague idea called the Babysitter Murders into a screenplay that focused on the unknowable evil of the boogeyman. They had cast their three babysitters. You had Jamie Lee Curtis, PJ Soles, and Nancy Kyes. So their next step was to cast the man tasked with hunting down the film's monster, Michael Myers' obsessive psychiatrist, Dr. Samuel Loomis. Now, finding the right actor for Loomis was one of the production's biggest hurdles. Carpenter knew that he needed a veteran presence to sell the idea that Michael Myers wasn't just an ordinary man, but an elemental force of evil. They needed someone who could project the kind of gravitas that would drive that point home to the audience. But with the budget that they were working on, they could only afford a paycheck of about $20,000 for just a few days' work. Carpenter's first thought was to cast veterans of British horror, Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing, both of whom I'm sure most of our listeners, if you're listening to this, know these guys made their name working on Hammer horror films. Both of them just basically turned him down flat. They may have seen Halloween as just another low-budget American exploitation film that was beneath them, which would be a little ironic considering some of the films that each of them had made over the years. Or maybe it was that $20,000 paycheck, which was much lower than either of their standard fees. Maybe that just wasn't enough to get them to travel to America for this little indie movie made by a filmmaker they'd never heard of. Now, I will say later in life, Christopher Lee said that turning down Halloween was the biggest mistake of his entire career, although I would wager that suiting up for 5 films worth of Yellowface as Fu Manchu had to rank pretty high on that list.
Hey, see, he was holding out for Big Trouble in Little China.
Well, after being rejected by Lee and Cushing, at the suggestion of Irwin Yablans, apparently, Carpenter turned to another British actor, one who'd bring an entirely different kind of energy to the role. A man named Donald Pleasence.
This fucking movie would already be made if they just get out of Irwin's way. It's like, let this man cook. I definitely did see Cushing's agent turn it down because of the $20,000 salary. That was just not good enough. And like you said, Christopher Lee, he took it personally. Like Deborah Hill in the commentary says that she was at an Avco embassy function and he was also there and he tracked her down to come tell her how sorry he was that he had passed on the movie because basically he enjoyed it, and also he said it just like completely gave Donald Pleasence an entirely new career, and he wished he had done it.
Wow. Well, and can you imagine, especially with Cushing? Now, Cushing had just done Star Wars, so like that's where the level he's working on right now. But he had played Van Helsing in several Hammer horror movies, so like playing a variation on a Van Helsing type character, it would have had this cool like meta layer. I mean, I love Donald Pleasence in this role, so I'm not saying I wish that Cushing had done it, but Cushing would have also played it very differently because he's a very sort of quiet, reserved presence on film. So it would have been very different than, because I will say what we're going to find about Donald Pleasence, not quiet or reserved on in his role as Dr. Loomis, and it gets increasingly less so as the franchise goes on.
Yeah, the fun part about Loomis is he becomes more and more unhinged as it goes. What if they got William Shatner?
Oh, that would have been good. That would have been weird, like them just looking at each other.
Right? How odd would that have been?
I'm trying to think of the devil's eyes, the blackest eyes.
Oh, man.
Speech done.
Yeah, I was just playing around, but actually, that'd be kind of fun.
Yeah. Yeah, it would have been a different experience, that's for sure. Donald Pleasence, he wasn't a star on the level of a Christopher Lee and a Peter Cushing, but he was a well-respected character actor who'd become known for playing intense, often unsettling men in films like Wake and Fright and as James Bond's arch nemesis Blofeld in You Only Live Twice. And furthermore, looking at his filmography, I think that it's pretty clear that he wasn't above slumming it when he needed to. Now, I went down a little bit of a rabbit hole on Donald Pleasence, kind of like you did on PJ Souls. Like I looked into Donald Pleasence because I was just curious, what led him here? He had done a couple of pretty big movies or movies that would become legendary before this, but like I said, he wasn't a Peter Cushing or a Christopher Lee at this time. So I was curious about like his pre-Halloween career in general. Now, I'm not going to do a whole biography on him, but this guy lived a hell of a life even before signing on for what I think is probably his most iconic role. So he had gotten the acting bug while he was in grammar school, and he was actually on the cusp of diving headfirst into a career as an actor when he joined the Royal Air Force near the beginning of World War II. Now, during the war, his plane was actually shot down in France, and he was captured by Nazi soldiers and imprisoned in a POW camp. And while he was there imprisoned, he produced and acted in plays for his fellow captives, which,
Yeah,
something to pass the time, I guess, raise morale. I don't know. But yeah, he was putting on plays in a Nazi prison camp.
this feels like some Hogan's Heroes shit or something.
Right, yeah. He would eventually be liberated by the Russians near the end of the war and discharged from the RAF. And then he spent most of the 50s and 60s mostly working on stage, I think most notably as the character of the Tramp and the Harold Pinter play The Caretaker. That was kind of his big role at the time, or the most lauded role that he had at the time. Now, he also did some screen work during this time. He made his television debut in 1946, actually, very, very early on. But in 1954, that's when he kind of like hit a stride. He appeared in the BBC's adaptation of George Orwell's 1984, where he actually starred alongside Peter Cushing.
Nice.
Then he would go on to appear in television shows. Like he was one of those guys that would just pop up in guest roles. Shows like The Twilight Zone, The Outer Limits, The Fugitive, Columbo. He was also taking small parts in feature films during this time, working with directors such as Roman Polanski and George Lucas. He's in THX 1138. He appeared in Gary Sherman's Raw Meat, which is a great horror film. If you haven't seen Raw Meat, I think it's awesome. Which also co-stars Christopher Lee. So he's worked with both Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee. And he plays the antagonist in Escape to Witch Mountain, which of course stars Kim Richards, the little girl who was murdered in Assault on Precinct 13. So there's connections here. There's weird connections here that I found pretty fascinating. Now, he wasn't exactly enamored with the Halloween script when he first met with Carpenter about the role. And he didn't sugarcoat his opinion. He told Carpenter that he thought it was rubbish. That was the word he used to describe it. He also didn't like the title. He thought it was weird. And he was skeptical, to say the least. And he wasn't entirely sure why he should even bother with this low-budget American indie flick. But he had one pretty compelling reason to consider it, and it had nothing to do with the screenplay. His daughter Angela, it turns out, had seen Assault on Precinct 13 when it was released in England. Remember, it was a huge hit in England, so she saw it during that run, and she absolutely loved it. She especially loved Carpenter's music in the film, and she told her dad that if the guy who had made that movie and made that music was calling him for a job, then he would be a fool not to accept. So, based on his daughter's musical taste, basically, Pleasence agreed to sign on. And, I mean, that's sort of the legend. That's the legend of this story. Is it true? I don't know that it's entirely true, but it's the one you hear repeated a lot. It's a good story. I think a more logical explanation for why he took the role is because he had a wife and 5 daughters to support. And, this guy, if you look at his filmography, he worked a lot. He didn't turn down a lot of paychecks. And this was 20 grand for like 3 or 4 days work. So, but even after he accepted the role, even after arriving on set, Pleasence remained kind of skeptical about it. He wasn't sure what he was getting into. And he flat out told Carpenter, he says, I still don't know why I'm in this movie, and I don't know who this character is. But Carpenter's advice to him was to think of Loomis like Captain Ahab chasing the white whale. And that was sort of it for him. That was the key. Based on the direction that he got from Carpenter on who this character was, Pleasence stopped trying to play Loomis as a psychiatrist and started playing him as an obsessive hunter. And in doing so, Pleasence brings this frantic, high-stakes gravitas to the role that I don't think either Peter Cushing or Christopher Lee would have brought to it. He plays Loomis not as a calm professional, but as a man who's been staring into the abyss for 15 years and who is absolutely terrified of what's climbing out of it.
That's a great way of putting it. There's just like this immediate like gravitas that it brings that when like I was joking about William Shatner, and it's crazy to me to think that there was ever any other choice than Donald Pleasence for this role. Like he just is Dr. Loomis.
He is Loomis. Yeah, he absolutely is.
Yeah, it's just crazy. Just the way that he talks about it from the very opening of the movie, just him talking about going to pick up Michael Myers. It's just, it does everything it's supposed to do. Like you're terrified of what he's terrified of. Like it's just, he's seen some shit.
And I called him the voice of doom, and that is what he is. I mean, he is the one, like he is, and he sells the doom. He sells the evil of Michael Myers. He has a hard time convincing the sheriff, but he sells it to the audience.
Yeah. And you mentioned, like him not getting it at first. There's even you sent me a video interview with him, like with the press. And I've seen that in a couple of different places now where he's just like, basically say, I think even some people titled the video on YouTube about like Donald Pleasence shitting on Halloween or something, but he's basically saying like, I don't completely understand what I'm doing. There's stuff in the script that I don't get, and people don't talk like this, that he's having to trust the direction or whatever. And, but that, and he tells that story there about his daughter too, getting him into it. And that I think he said like with Assault on Precinct 13, there was like a tongue in cheek way she told him to view it that helped him kind of wrap his brain around it or something. Anyway, there's stories about him being like Carpenter was intimidated by him because this is the biggest actor that he's worked with, basically.
Yeah, right.
And supposedly Pleasence would like grill him like about the script, and that Carpenter says he found out later that Pleasence was testing him deliberately, like with difficult questions to see what kind of director he was and if he had real passion for this and if he was being serious about making a good movie. But that Donald Pleasence was having a little fun with him. And the story goes that he eventually, like as hard as he was on it at first, he actually started to fall in love with the whole thing because he says like everybody around him had like so much passion for what was going on, and that it started to show. People tell the stories that he like started to become obsessed with the spirit of the whole thing, and that he became like the elder statesman on the whole production. Like he was, like he was not required to do anything for his role except wait for his turn to act, come out of his camper and film scenes. And he eventually had gotten to a point where he was so excited about doing the movie. They said he was like coming out and like physically helping the crew pack away stuff and move to the next location and like that sort of thing. Like he was actually having a good time being a part of it with all these like younger actors and stuff. Yeah. And he also, for what it's worth, I mean, he offered something to Dr. Loomis that may not have come with anybody else. Like he apparently was a lot of the reason like Loomis he thought the scripted Loomis was a little had too much humanity in him. Like he I guess in the initial script, there was a scene written, like for instance, where Loomis stops at a payphone to call his wife and he talks to her and Pleasence told Carpenter, like, I don't want to shoot that. Like Loomis shouldn't have a wife. He shouldn't have a family or even a past. Like it should just be about him chasing Michael. And
he's got like a one-track mind, like Ahab. Like he's got this like obsessive one-track mind where he spent 15 years of his life at this point obsessing over this. So that makes sense. Like that is his focus. No, he doesn't have time for a family life.
Yeah. And Carpenter agreed with him and scrapped that whole scene. And Pleasance was just like, listen, bitch, I ain't got no family. I got paranoia. That's what I got. I got this badass trench coat, and that's it. And John Carpenter's like, yes, sir. You are alone in the universe. That is what we will do. But they seem to work really well together on all this once it started clicking. I remember seeing John Carpenter talk about that even in the last scene where Loomis looks out and the body's gone. And like Donald Pleasence comes to him and says, okay, so I can do this two ways that can potentially work. Do you want it to be, oh my God, what's happening? Or do you want it to be, I knew this was going to happen?
Yeah, this was inevitable. Yeah.
He's like, because I could do both with the look. John Carpenter says, he's like, I was young. I didn't know. So I said, can we do it both ways? And he said that Donald Pleasence did do it. And he was talking about, it's just his face, but it's like, you could see it both ways, like the reaction that he has.
And they went with the second one.
And they went with I knew this was going to to happen.
Yeah. Because that look on his face at the end, he's not shocked or anything. He's just like, God damn it.
Saw this coming. My favorite story of his, though, is that he had this like apparent like swagger about him too. I mean, he's the hot shit on this set especially, but of course there's the scene when Loomis and Nurse Marion are driving in the car discussing Michael or whatever. Like Donald Pleasence apparently before this, now this is the story I saw in a few different places, that he was just like chilling on set. They had lunch and he drank 2 entire bottles of wine all himself, and people were like, fuck. Like they were terrified. He doesn't sound he sounds incomprehensible right now, and this is not going to work. And then as soon as he stepped in front of the camera and they said action, they just said he nailed it like immediately.
Wow.
Like
just turned it on.
That whole scene he just like was flawless in. Next time you watch it, Dr. Loomis is drunk in that scene.
Which scene is it? Which scene was it?
It's the one where they're in the car and he's talking about like, I sat with him and I watched him.
Like one of the most iconic monologues that he has in the whole movie.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So in honor of him, before our next episode, I'm going to drink 2 bottles of wine to see how I do.
Excellent. Can't wait.
I guess while we're here, and since I'm talking so much, we should also mention in the casting the return.
It's a podcast. Like talking is sort of what we do.
I know. I just don't want to take all the space up with my voice. But we also see the return here of Charles Cyphers as Sheriff Lee Brackett.
Playing another cop.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you listen to Assault on Precinct 13, Charles Cyphers is one of John Carpenter's regulars, and just like Nancy Kice at this point, I think I mentioned in that episode that Carpenter thought he made a great cop, which he was in Assault. He was again in Someone's Watching Me.
Yeah,
and he's back.
He's got like 2 scenes and he's a cop.
Yeah. But this time he's Lee Brackett, who is named after the screenwriter Rio Bravo, which is a name Carpenter toyed with in Assault. But this time he just said, fuck it, I guess. And like, let's do the whole name.
Full name. So, yeah, because you had Laurie Zimmer's character's name was Lee in Assault on Precinct 13, which we mentioned that episode was a tribute to Lee Brackett. At this time, Lee Brackett was still alive and actually working on the first draft of Empire Strikes Back around the same time, which would be directed by Irvin Kershner right after he directed Eyes of Laura Mars. So, which, another weird bit of serendipity, but she passed away before the movie came out, so she didn't get to like see the character named after her.
Charles Cyphers is one of those guys where we'll talk about him again because, I mean, he, like I said, he's in Assault on Precinct 13. Someone's Watching Me. He's in this movie. He's in Elvis. He's in The Fog. He's in Escape from New York. He's even in Halloween 2 for a little bit. So he's around for stuff John Carpenter does.
Even in the 2018 franchise, like he shows back up as
that's true.
This character, yeah.
Also, we've got Kyle Richards as Lizzie Wallace, who a lot of people may know better as a Real Housewife, which we talked about last time. She's also the sister of Kim Richards, who we mentioned earlier, as a little girl who got vanilla twist ice cream on Assault on Precinct 13, but ate a bullet instead. Also, another random fun fact about them: they're the aunts of Paris Hilton, which I don't think I realized until I was more in the rabbit hole this time.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Weird.
There's that. I guess I'll point out Brian Andrews plays Tommy Doyle, who I will just mention. I don't know a ton about him except to say that I do think he does a very good job, or at least he credits John Carpenter with his direction. But like he didn't even meet Jamie Lee Curtis until the first day of shooting, which was shocking information to me because I have to say they seem to have a very natural chemistry together. Like I believe she has been babysitting this kid for a while.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's even a scene like where when she's going to drop the keys off at the Myers house and he pulls her arm back. You're just like, no, you can't go up there. That apparently wasn't even like a scripted thing. That was like an improvisation that they did like at the time. And Carpenter dug it. So anyway, I just like that they seem like they have a real relationship.
Yeah.
And I suppose we should mention Nancy Stevens too, right? Like it's a smaller role.
Nurse Marion, but she also comes back in the 2018 franchise later on.
Oh yeah, she's just this little moment. She seals the deal for a character that gets brought back in multiple sequels. She's in H2O.
That's right.
She's in Halloween 2 also. Fun fact, she's married to Rick Rosenthal, who will be the director of Halloween 2.
They weren't married at the time yet though, right?
I don't think so at the time.
Yeah, they do marry later on, yeah.
He also ends up directing Resurrection.
Yep.
Right? I think. Yeah. So good for him.
I guess.
Yeah, and Will Sandon is baby Michael Myers. I don't know what else to say about him, really, except now that I'm thinking about it, like Michael Myers is like 6 people in this movie, but I guess we'll talk about that.
Yeah, there are quite a few. So, and, you mentioned the Lee Brackett, like, Easter egg. That's one of several Easter eggs in this. Like, Tommy Doyle's character is named after the character played by, it's a police detective, played by Wendell Corey in Rear Window, Alfred Hitchcock's Rear Window, Lieutenant Thomas Doyle. And Dr. Loomis, Sam Loomis, is a direct reference to Psycho, which of course stars Janet Leigh, Jamie Lee's mom. But the John Gavin's character is named Sam Loomis. He's the boyfriend of Janet Leigh's character, Marion Crane, who goes looking for her.
If you look online, you will find people that are straight up trying to force this thing that like that Sam Loomis is this Sam Loomis that like
no shit, really.
After the whole shit with Marion Crane. Well, I just watched Psycho like a week ago, unrelated to this. Just Jennifer picked it for our movie night and we watched it. And so he's like a hardware salesman or something in that movie.
Yeah.
Like he has a hardware business.
He went back to college, became a psychiatrist.
That's the story you're writing that other people have written. And he gets obsessed with understanding the like psychopathic mind and finds this kid who killed his sister on Halloween.
You know what? I'm okay with it. I'm okay with that. I like that fan theory. It's stupid, but I like it. I think it was really just because John Carpenter idolized Alfred Hitchcock. And there are a couple of other names in this that those are kind of like his cinematic references or Easter eggs. But Laurie Strode that's more of a personal Easter egg. Laurie Strode was named after one of Carpenter's ex-girlfriends. Ben Tramer was named after a guy named Bennett Tramer, who was one of Carpenter's buddies from film school. They went to school together.
The other name that they mentioned, I wish I had written this down because I can't remember, but even the, what's his name? Dick Baxter, just like who Annie pitches to Laurie at first. And then she said, I'd rather go with Bennett Tramer or whatever. Like that was somebody too, the Dick Baxter guy.
That they knew
for some reason.
Wait till we get to the Fog. I mean, he throws in like every character is named after somebody in the Fog, right. I feel like. So the primary cast is in place now, but the movie still needed its monster. They needed someone who could embody the shape, that unknowable horror of Michael Myers, and someone who could do it without uttering a single word. So to fill those famous coveralls, Carpenter turned to his friend Nick Castle. Now, Nick Castle wasn't really an actor, although he had played a very different type of monster in Carpenter's Dark Star, the beach ball guy. But he was actually an aspiring filmmaker and a fellow USC film student who just happened to be hanging around on set.
Yeah, and it's worth saying. I mean, they're best friends.
They're good buddies.
You mentioned they go to USC together, and Castle's in Dark Star. He's Beach Ball Alien, so he was around anyway. And I mean, as far as people in John Carpenter's circle goes, besides Deborah Hill, it was like Tommy Lee Wallace and Nick Castle were like his go-tos.
Those are his buddies, yeah.
Yeah, I was actually digging a little bit more into Tommy Lee Wallace when I was researching for this, just trying to understand a little bit more like where they met exactly. And I think I said he was his friend in high school or whatever, because he was from Bowling Green, Kentucky, and we talked about that in Assault on Precinct 13, but I think since then I learned it goes like way deeper. Like I think I mentioned in that episode that they literally ran into each other in the hallway, but initially they hated each other's guts, like which Carpenter says is a requirement for becoming best friends in the world. So we should hate each other, Justin. I guess like Tommy Lee Wallace was like this kid who played church basketball and he was going to be a preacher, something like that. And he like latched on to John Carpenter and appreciated how creative and gung-ho he was about his creativity. And he was one of the first people that apparently sat down with him and was like, we got to get out of Bowling Green. We got to go somewhere else. And that they decided they were going to go to LA together. And literally flipped through a college catalog to try to find like what school to go to, and they decided to choose USC.
Oh wow!
Yeah, so that they both moved to LA together. And once they got to USC, one of the first people that they made friends with was Nick Castle, they all would go out together, watch kung fu movies. And they said they were just attracted to anything with like grittiness and style. That's all they do. Those nights they would just go out and watch these kinds of movies. And they had this favorite restaurant they went to. I can't recall the name, but they said it had like this 20-foot statue of a guy holding a bucket of fried chicken. So there's that. I think the story goes that Castle was basically living near where they were filming anyway, and he had these aspirations himself to become a director, which he will do. He makes the classic that I love so much, The Last Starfighter. For
Major Pain.
Yeah. That's a good one. That aside, he wanted to learn more about directing, so he was like saying, I'm at least going to hang out here, and so Carpenter okayed him hanging out on set. We mentioned it before, but Nick Castle, Tommy Lee Wallace, and John Carpenter also at this time had a band called the Coupe de Villes. And in the book, Kim Gottlieb Walker's on set with John Carpenter, which is incredible, I'll say. You can see photos from the rap party and the Coupe de Villes perform, and they actually come out all in masks, like shape masks.
Oh, that's good.
Anyway, I thought that was
good. I need to get that book. Well, when Castle was on set, Carpenter noticed the way that he moved. While he wasn't a professional dancer himself, Castle actually came from a family of dancers. His father, Nicholas Castle Sr., was a legendary choreographer. I went down a little bit of a rabbit hole on this. I think I sent you a biography that I found on him because I was just fascinated by this. But Nick Castle Sr. had begun his career in vaudeville prior to his career in Hollywood, where he worked with icons like Fred Astaire, Gene Kelly, Judy Garland, Shirley Temple. Like, this was a choreographer to the stars. And because of his father's profession, the younger Castle grew up on film sets, surrounded by world-class dancers and movement coaches. So while he never pursued dance as a career for himself, he just kind of naturally inherited a specific grace and a keen sense of rhythm just from being around it all the time. And Carpenter didn't want the shape to be a traditional lumbering monster, like walking around like Frankenstein. He wanted a graceful, almost floating walk. And he recognized that innate rhythmic quality in his friend Nick. So he offered Castle $25 a day to just put on a mask and walk, just utilizing his natural grace. And so that iconic Michael Myers walk, that slow, steady, predatory, almost like a glide, that was really the result of a film student who grew up watching his father choreograph some of the greatest dancers in cinema history.
$25 doesn't seem like a lot, but I mean, Carpenter needed the shape, and he liked this about Nick and was just like, why don't you come do this? And you make $25 an hour and you're here every day anyway. Now you can get paid for it.
Right.
And Nick talks about having reservations. He's like, I'm not really an actor. Wearing a fucking mask, dude.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't
You're
matter.
not acting. Yeah. But that was a choice that it really defines the character. Castle's performance brought a quality to Michael's movements that turned a man in a jumpsuit into something that felt almost otherworldly. So now they just needed to find the final and arguably most important element of the character, which is his mask.
I don't think this is like a widely believed thing, but it is in like even the IMDb trivia that Don Post was asked to make the mask and turned it down or something.
I don't think there's any way they could have afforded Don Post to make a custom mask for this.
Oh, I think that's what's in IMDb, is that they got Don Post to make it. But the story really is, as best I can figure it out, is that apparently they may have approached Don Post about doing it. They couldn't afford to pay him. They offered him points on the movie if he would make something custom for them. And he did turn it down because, according to him in the story, it's like every fucking cheap horror movie in the world comes to me and asks me to make them something for free, and I'm not going to get anything off this. So, which I'm sure probably does happen, or did happen to him.
Yeah.
So whatever. So they'll just use one of his masks anyway, I guess.
Well, yeah. So they didn't, like I said, they didn't really have the money and the budget to get a custom prosthetic created. So Tommy Lee Wallace, who is the production designer on the film, among many other things, he went down the street to Burt Wheeler's Magic Shop on Hollywood Boulevard, and he was tasked with the mission to find something unsettling, something that looked like a human face, but not quite, is how they described it.
Yeah, according to John Carpenter, when they were writing the script for Halloween, they described it in their notes as he says right from the start, they had like the idea, I want a pale mask with human features, just kind of also featureless, basically.
Yeah.
And he says later, by the way, that specific description was because he had seen it was like kind of inspired by, I'm going to say this name wrong.
Clouseau?
It's George Frondieu's 1960
Eyes
movie,
Without a Face.
Eyes Without a Face.
Yeah. That makes sense. That makes sense.
Which is also, by the way, I watched that not too long ago, and that's a great movie and got some body horror in it that is amazing that it happened in 1960, I think.
Yeah. Well, Wallace found a couple of not quite human options for Carpenter. The first was an Emmett Kelly clown mask with frizzy red hair. If you've ever, I don't know how to describe it, it's like a sad clown, hobo kind of thing. If you've ever seen Emmett Kelly as a clown, just Google it and you'll see what I'm talking about. Would have been creepy, and it would have kind of like been a callback to Michael's costume in the opening scene of the film where he's wearing a clown mask. So that kind of makes sense. But even though it felt creepy, it was a little too traditional. Like, oh yeah, doing a clown mask. That's kind of boring. The other option that Wallace found was a $2, or I think it was actually $1.98, Captain Kirk mask modeled after William Shatner. And that, of course, is the one they went with very famously. If you're saying to yourself, well, Michael Myers looks nothing like William Shatner, well, you're not wrong. If you look up pictures of the original mask before they modify it, it didn't really look like William Shatner either. It just looked like some random white dude. Like it just looked like some guy. It does not look like William Shatner really remotely. Then it was even further modified by Wallace to get it screen ready. And to do so, he widened the eye holes to create deep black pits. He spray painted the flesh toned rubber a ghostly death mask white. It's almost like a bluish white hue. And then finally, he ripped off the sideburns, darkened the hair with spray on color, and just kind of teased it and then matted it down.
William Shatner in interviews says that the mask he thought was made for something with Star Trek. He calls it the death mask, and they had used it to do makeup effects to test them without having to have him around. But the actual story I read is that it was from like the original mold was from this movie called The Devil's Reign, and it was a cast of his face.
Okay,
that Don Post ended up acquiring that mold, and they used it to mass produce the Captain Kirk mask. But yeah, you can check out The Devil's Reign or just give the images a Google, and you'll see like there's a pre-pasty Mikey on there. Like with some pictures of William Shatner. For what it's worth, he said the first time he was told that was his face, it was like during an interview. He had no idea, and his initial reaction was, "What is that a fucking joke? Are you kidding me?"
How long after the movie had been out was he told? I wonder.
No, I think it was a while after that he really realized that was like originally him. But he found out through like an interview he was in, and somebody asked him about it. It's a dumb coincidence, I think, that these two things I loved in childhood is like the OG Trek and Michael Myers. They share this like weird connection.
Yeah.
Like that. And I never knew that growing up at first, I don't think. So interesting.
Yeah. Well, when Nick Castle stepped onto the set wearing that modified mask for the first time, according to like Carpenter and several other people, the entire cast and crew just like went cold. Like it was creepy. Everyone was kind of creeped out by it right away. And by stripping away all of the features of the mask, Wallace he'd created like a total void, this blank, pale, emotionless face, one that allowed the audience to project their own worst fears onto it.
You really start feeling like the more you read about this stuff, just how much these like it's a community effort on a lot of these things, that like Carpenter, there's no doubting like Carpenter is John Carpenter, but it's just like there's these cool aspects that like all these different people that he surrounds himself with bring to it. Like, what would the mask have been if Tommy Lee Wallace wasn't there?
Right. Yeah. Like it's we say it time and time again on the show, like filmmaking is a collaborative effort, especially on certain movies. You've got a director who is an auteur. John Carpenter, I would consider an auteur because his movies are distinctly his. David Lynch. Most of the directors we talk about, honestly, could be considered an auteur, but they still have to like work with their collaborators. They're not making the movie all on their own, and they're choosing the collaborators and they're making the final decisions. If Tommy Lee Wallace had made this mask and come to John Carpenter and it sucked, it would be his job to say, no, that's not right. Let's do it a different way. He's the one who turned down the Emmett Kelly mask, so it's a collaborative effort, but John Carpenter has such a close crew of collaborators, and we'll see a lot of these same names pop up over and over again. It's because that they just gel well together. They vibe together, and they're able to create magic together because of that relationship.
Why couldn't you have been a director and then I become best friends with you and you use me to pay me lots of money to do things?
Sorry.
Yeah. All right. Just thought I'd throw that out there. You should feel bad about yourself. I'm just kidding. We're doing this together, and it's a community effort for us.
I have plenty of reason to feel bad about myself. So with the cast lock, the production began its lightning fast shoot in the spring of 1978. And when I say lightning fast, I mean very, very fast. Halloween was shot in 20 days. Some places you see 21 days, but basically 3 weeks. And it would have to do so with an almost aggressive lack of resources. Now, it's easy to forget that now, I think. And that's why I want to mention that. Because when we look at Halloween as the phenomenon that it later became, the sequels, the reboots, the two careers that it launched into the stratosphere, John Carpenter and Jamie Lee Curtis, everything else, it's really easy to project a sense of inevitability onto it. But Halloween was a genuinely scrappy little indie production held together by ingenuity, personal relationships, and the kind of creative problem solving that only happens when you've got no other options. So take, for instance, the filming location. Because there wasn't any money for travel, Haddonfield, Illinois had to be found in the heart of Southern California, specifically in the older neighborhoods of South Pasadena. But here's the thing about Southern California in the spring. It doesn't look or feel a whole lot like Illinois does in the fall. So while they were able to find neighborhoods filled with lush trees, like the kind that you'd find lining the streets of a Midwestern suburb, they still face some challenges to make the locations seem believable. So to create the illusion of an Illinois autumn, the crew had to bring in bags of dried leaves, then they had to hand paint them a specific shade of autumnal brown, and then they scattered them across the lawns or on the street for every outdoor shot. And then after each scene, because again, they don't have a lot of money to just buy all the leaves they want. After each scene, they would rake them all up, put them in bags, and then just take them to the next location to use them all over again.
Insane. Now, I will say for a while, I don't know, I may not have been obsessed with movies the way I am now in the same way, I guess, like learning so many details about them. I had no idea about the California thing at first, and I lived in Illinois for a while. And when I went to Illinois, maybe it was just in my brain that I wanted to make it this way, but my girlfriend at the time lived in a suburb in Illinois, and I felt like it looked exactly like Halloween. It was like creepy to me.
Yeah.
Like I felt like this is perfect. So I will give them credit for that. But hand painting leaves is insane. And it wasn't just them, because they're shooting in the spring. It's not like you don't find pumpkins either. So there are no actual pumpkins in California. So to make the like jack-o'-lanterns and stuff, they bought like these green squashes that had been imported from South America and literally spray painted them orange. And that's what they're using.
Wow.
Tommy Lee Wallace was doing all this. By the way, he also is the one who carved that opening pumpkin that's so famous too, I think.
Yeah, which is great. In the original script, it was supposed to be Michael Myers' mask. Like, that's how it reads in the script. If you read the first, 2 pages of the script, it's the Shape's mask that slowly comes towards the camera. I think the pumpkin is a better choice because it saves the reveal of Michael Myers for later on,
Yeah, that's good.
So while this all helped sell the facade, there were some things that they just couldn't hide. If you've ever been to Southern California, then you know that there are palm trees everywhere. And if you look closely, in the background of several scenes in Halloween, you can still see those palm trees swaying. Just a subtle reminder that the Haddonfield that the world fell in love with was actually just a cleverly disguised pocket of Los Angeles. If you want to go watch the movie, you want to look for the palm trees, I think the place where they're easiest to spot is in that scene where they pull up to the hardware store after it's been broken into, because there's no way to hide them in the background. They're back there. Like, you can just see them pretty clearly. They're in other scenes too, but that's the most very obvious one to me. Now, for the childhood home of Michael Myers, the crew found a dilapidated structure in South Pasadena that was owned by a local church and was slated for demolition. And Tommy Lee Wallace has called this house a gift to the production. Because it was already so decrepit, the crew just didn't have to do much to make it look like it had been rotting abandoned for 15 years. And another challenge of shooting in Southern California was, of course, the weather. It's just too nice compared to Illinois in the fall. So the characters that we see on screen are bundled up in sweaters and coats trying to sell the chill of an Illinois October. But in reality, they're shooting in the spring in Los Angeles. These actors are sweltering in the California sun.
Another thing that's fun about it too is just that they have the windiness of Illinois. So the leaves that blow across. So you're talking about the leaves that are hand painted. They have to keep picking up, but they're also at certain points blowing leaves across. Or they literally had people that came in and volunteered and took leaves out of a bag and threw them across the screen.
Make it look like leaves were falling out of the trees, kind of thing.
Yeah, one of these volunteers, Mr. Robert Englund, Freddy Krueger himself.
Wow.
He said he just had a roommate who had heard about the job and was just like, hey, you want to go work on this movie set? And he was in Hollywood trying to make a name for himself. And he came out through leaves for Halloween.
That's wild. What the hell? He was in movies at this time because Eaten Alive.
I was going to say he'd been at Eaten Alive.
Yeah, that was 1976. So not that movie made him a ton of money or anything. That was a pretty scrappy little thing too.
Oh yeah, yeah. He was a working actor, but I think it was with Access is who the interview was with, and he tells that story that like he came out and threw leaves on Halloween.
That's wild. Wow. How about that? That was a fun fact, Gary.
Yeah, you're right. So Freddy Krueger is in the background
of Halloween
somewhere,
right, just off camera. Well, I mentioned the sweaters and coats, so I want to talk a little bit about the wardrobe department. There wasn't one, at least not like in a traditional sense, not on this movie. Jamie Lee Curtis has mentioned in several interviews that she went to JCPenney and spent about $100 of her own money to buy Laurie's entire wardrobe, looking for plain and sensible clothes that fit a studious high schooler. Like she wanted to find stuff that she thought would fit Laurie Strode, of course. Likewise, Nancy Loomis and PJ Soles wore their own clothes in the film. And I think this actually worked in the film's favor because the girls feel more authentic because they're wearing what actual teenagers would pick out to wear in 1978, not some costume designer's interpretation of it. I mean, like Deborah Hill, I think, had the final say. Obviously, they're not just going to show up and not ask anyone, hey, is this okay? Like Deborah Hill was the one who like would say, yes, this works. You can wear that. But they were bringing the ideas to her.
I was in the photo book where Annie's laid out on the bed, you know, with the tombstone or whatever. And in that photo, Nancy Kies is telling the story about, I think I've still got all that stuff. She was like, Ashley, I gave those socks to Goodwill.
Somebody's got them. Well, that same sort of bring your own policy applied to some of the cars on the film as well. The production couldn't afford to rent a whole fleet of vehicles, so the crew usually just used their own like personal cars. Now, the most iconic vehicle in the film, the Ford station wagon that Michael steals from Smith's Grove and later uses to stalk the girls through Haddonfield, that was like the only rental car, I think, used in the entire film.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk about who's driving that car around as Michael Myers, and I think you've seen that it was Erwin Yablans, which, of course, it would be.
Erwin Yablans says that it was Erwin Yablans. That's what it is. He says that he's like, hey, I got behind the wheel of the car a few times as Michael Myers. Like, shut up, dude. You probably weren't even on set for most of the shoot.
It's hard to imagine that like he's going out there like hanging around all day. You know,
they banned him from the set of Halloween too.
I didn't know that, but that's great.
Yeah, I saw that in one of the Deborah Hill interviews that I watched for this. She talks about him being banned from the set of Halloween too. They literally would not let him on set.
Yeah, well, I guess the point I wanted to make here is that I've seen it mentioned too that Barry Bernardi was the driver at certain points, and I think it's worth mentioning Barry Bernardi because he's just this guy that he was just there to help out with silly little things. And like he was a PA basically or something, I think. But like the mechanic that Michael Myers kills and gets his outfit from, like that red mechanic's truck. I don't remember if that was actually Bernardi's truck, but they did say that he had a red pickup, and like part of what he would do every day was he'd come out of like Cokes from for everybody, or actually Dr. Pepper in that photo album. They actually have a lot of pictures with Dr. Pepper cans because apparently Dr. Pepper donated drinks to them on set. And, if they'd agree to have
one
photos.
Of Nick Castle, like drinking that.
So anyway, Barry would end up going to do all of these things. Dean Cundy, when interviewed, that son of a bitch, we'll talk about him later.
We'll get there.
He said that you know, he was really great about whatever you needed. Like he was on it everywhere you went. Like he said, they would be like setting up a scene and be like, God, we really need a light down the street, probably in that driveway over there. And they weren't sure how to proceed. And Barry would be like, oh, I got it. And like he would go and like meet the homeowner of whoever that was and make friends with them. And not only would they let him set up a light there, they would use their electricity to power it.
Wow.
And, he was just great.
He became like the de facto location manager, basically.
Yeah,
I think
seems like it.
Didn't he also help secure like the location for Smith's Grove? I feel like I saw that he was instrumental in helping them get that location where they actually filmed the sanitarium.
Yeah, you might be right. Actually, now that you say that, I think I remember something like that. And I think he really got there because I think Deborah Hill knew him was the deal. And like, so he was also bringing in like coffee and donuts for everybody in the morning, and like he was just
Right.
taking like whatever gopher role there was, like he was involved in it. And so I'd also seen he was driving the car a little bit. Anyway, I mean, over a period of time, he ended up moving up, and he's going to end up being a part of several more movies with John Carpenter. Or a few at least with John Carpenter. I know he's involved in Escape from New York and Christine and
The Fog, Starman.
Fogs,
like he's a producer. He becomes a producer.
Yeah, he moved to like associate producer, then executive producer. He's the executive producer on almost every one of Adam Sandler's movies.
I was about to say he does a lot of Adam Sandler movies now. I looked at his IMDb the other day and I was like, this guy is making some money off Adam Sandler. Like, good for him.
Yeah, I mean, he is, but that's like his start. That's crazy to think about, but like just him being a gopher on Halloween, like for all of this stuff. But he was just helpful and doing his thing. And anyway, and that rental car I think is funny. I mean, that's Tommy Lee Wallace again. He said he was looking for like a government looking car, I think that's the way they put it. And and then he found that station wagon, put on like bolted in a wire mesh divider in there, and so they slap on the decal. And I don't know. I'm imagining like the rental car agency, like thinking they're like giving this out for like some family's vacay. And little did they know. I think they called it the Shape Mobile in like some of the commentary. That's like what they called it. And and Tommy Lee Wallace says that when it wasn't used for Michael Myers stalking people, it was the main vehicle the art department used to get their shit from place to place too.
Okay. Yeah, and Bernardi or whoever else, I don't know if he drove in every scene, but definitely in some of them where Michael's kind of stalking the girls. You don't see the mask. I mean, you can't see the person driving the car the way they shot it, which makes sense because if the girls saw some masked man behind the car, they would have questions because they think it's some guy. I forget who it is that Jamie Lee mentions later on. But one of the reasons they did that was not just because they wanted to keep it a mystery, but because it was practical. They had like one mask. They had one Michael Myers mask, so they didn't want to like use it if they didn't have to. So they just kept him in shadow, which is a kind of ingenious way to get by doing that. Yeah,
he is. I'm 95% sure he is wearing it though in that scene with Speed Kills, because he drives by them and like looks at them, and I think if you look at it just right, it looks like he does have the mask on there.
Does he in that one? Okay,
yeah. Anyway, I love that scene. Just the way he like stops as soon as they say it, and like it, just like he's contemplating whether or not like do I do this?
Should
now?
I go kill them now? Yeah. And I also love Nancy Kies's just delivery during that too. She's great. But anyway, talking about the cars, the other cars in the film belong to most like crew members, friends of crew members. That red Ford Maverick that we see Annie and Laurie driving when you hear "Don't Fear the Reaper" and when they drive up to the hardware store that's been broken into. The car where Annie would eventually be murdered. That was Deborah Hill's personal car. The BMW that Loomis drives belonged to a friend of the crew. They chose a BMW because they thought this European psychiatrist would be driving a BMW versus kind of the American muscle cars that you see through the rest of the movie. Several other crew members' cars, including Carpenter's own beat-up Cadillac, they're used in the background of several scenes just to make the neighborhood look more lived in.
Well, like the band name, John's car was a Cadillac Coupe de Ville. I don't know this for a fact, but I did double check this at the beginning of the movie. Laurie's dad, the Strode Realty car, is a Cadillac Coupe de Ville. So I bet that's John Carpenter.
That's the one. Yeah.
Yeah.
This production was so lean.
How lean was it?
Thank you, Gary. This production, I feel like we're doing a Muppet Show a bit. The production was so lean that they didn't even have a proper base of operations. There wasn't like a production office. There weren't cast and crew trailers for everyone to go retreat to. There was a Winnebago. There was a Winnebago, one that belonged to cinematographer Dean Cundy. And this Winnebago served as a dressing room, production office, mess hall, kind of all rolled into one. And then once the shoot wrapped for the day, it also housed the film's Panavision camera and atmospheric lenses. Gear, I mean, they spent like $70,000 to rent it, which is, to your point earlier, a huge chunk of the budget. Almost a third of the budget of the film or a quarter of the budget of the film was used to rent this stuff. But the actual value of those Panavision cameras and lenses were over $500,000, meaning that the value of that gear was worth more money than the entire budget of the film. So naturally, the crew treated this Winnie like it housed the crown jewels. Like they were. I read one story and I couldn't corroborate it, so I wasn't 100% sure if it was true. But I read one story that said that Dean Cundey would sleep in the Winnebago at night because he didn't want to leave them alone.
Oh my
if we ever get Dean on the show, we'll have to ask him about that. Now, I am giving y'all all of these little fun anecdotes because I really want to hammer in the idea that Halloween really was a small independent film in every sense of the word. This all hands on deck energy was vital to getting the movie made. I mean, there are stories of Jamie Lee on set, carrying around pieces of equipment, doing whatever it takes to help. Just like you were talking earlier, even Donald Pleasence chipped in. They're just doing whatever it took to get this thing made.
It's funny with those cars and everything. I forgot to look this time, but I've even heard if you look really hard, you can see California license plates on them or something like that. I feel like that was like a common.
Oh, yeah, that would make sense.
Out. But when you listen to the commentary, Carpenter talks about the situation with the vehicles, like they had like this caravan. Like there's a few interviews where they kind of discuss it. Like it almost sounded like they had like a couple of Winnies, and Cundey, I guess, had a Winnebago, but I can't tell if there was supposed to be this customized Dodge van that he had. So I don't know. We need to get that son of a bitch on the podcast so we can ask him himself, because he had something that Deborah Hill affectionately refers to as the movie van. And apparently
is that Paul's van?
That's what I wonder. I wonder if it is Paul's van.
Yeah.
And that he would carry around all the stuff because he used to like apparently drive to all of his gigs instead. So he ended up buying all of his own stuff and went driving around or whatever, go to wherever he was going. Anyway, and then there's stories that talk about it like Donald Pleasence had his own private Winnebago, like that he was the only one because he's Donald fucking Pleasence and he drinks 2 bottles of wine at lunch. And
he gets whatever he wants.
Everybody else is crammed into like another RV and doing their own makeup like elbow to elbow, but this is like Hollywood class system. Like you don't get your own dressing room till you fight James Bond, bitch.
This sort of like I don't know what you call it, like this sort of DIY, do whatever it takes approach applied to the background actors as well, because they didn't have a budget. I don't know how many times I'm going to say they didn't have the budget for it, or they didn't have the money for it, but they didn't have the budget for a professional casting call. So when they needed extras to portray the residents of Haddonfield, they just rounded up crew members' own families, mostly. Like the dark-haired bully that smashes Tommy Doyle's pumpkin at the beginning of the movie or early on in the movie, that was Mickey Yablans. You'll see him in the end credits. That's the son of producer Erwin Yablans. He got a little cameo in the movie as an asshole. This was really truly the kind of production where if you were standing on the sidewalk and you were related to anybody on the crew, there's a good chance you're going to end up in the movie. It's just one of those type of productions.
It really was like such a tight knit crew, and it's worth mentioning just too that like everything was kind of run really smoothly for what they're doing to get this all done in this amount of time. And one of the people behind that, I'm going to give credit to again, is Deborah Hill, and like Tommy Lee Wallace talks about like if you were coming on set, like if you didn't already know her, like that she might be one of the only people you would question at first because she's John Carpenter's girlfriend, and so they think that there's like people that were talking about like or worried about like maybe there's a little nepotism going on here, and Tommy Lee Wallace says that you might have thought that at first, but when she went into action on set, she was a force. Like she knew how to make a movie. She knew what needed to go where, when it needed to happen, where people needed to be. And she was like the most professional person and on the money about everything as anybody could be. He said that she was vital to this movie and the filming of this movie. He even tells a story about like how something went wrong on set one day and it pissed him off. And he said his temper got the best of him and he's like looking for somebody to blame. And he just starts to yell out like, "Who the hell did this?" And he said before the whole sentence even got out of his mouth, he said Deborah Hill was like in front of him saying, "It does not matter. Fix it." And
wow.
And he said if he had to describe Deborah Hill in a nutshell, that would be it.
Nice. Let's just turn this into a Deborah Hill series, shall we?
Right. Exactly. That's how I felt the more I researched the movie. I was just like, God, this movie does not happen without Deborah Hill.
No, it's like she is absolutely integral to it. All right, so we've already mentioned him a couple of times, but I think we really need to pause, take a minute to acknowledge the man who gave Halloween its look. Y'all know who I'm talking about. I'm talking about Dean motherfucking Cundy.
Dean Cundy, you son of a bitch. You did it again, Dean.
Big Dick Dean. That's what I'm going to call him.
Oh, my God. Please. That's
Big Dick Dean.
Oh, man. We've talked about Dean Cundy on other podcasts, like our past podcast, but I don't think we've really had a chance to
this is the first. Yeah. If you're a long time follower of me and Gary on the podcast circuit, then if you heard our old show Slice of Fried Gold and the Psychotronic Film Society, or RIP both of those shows, but we talked about Dean Cundy a lot, and we blew a lot of smoke up his ass because he's the best. He deserves every bit of that smoke. Open up, Dean.
Oh,
open wide.
Open your ass, Dean. That's the smoke. Oh man, I just know that his name, like I talked about with John Carpenter and Deborah Hill, it's probably Halloween would have been the first movie I noticed Dean Cundy's name, maybe. But then one of the things is even on Halloween too, I love how they look. I just love how the movies look. And so once I even knew what a director of photography was or cinematographer or whatever, it was Dean Cundy's name would pop up. And then you're talking about the guy who's going to do The Thing and Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
Back to the Future.
Casper
Escape from New York. Yeah, Casper, of course. Psycho 2. He does Apollo 13.
He does a lot of Zemeckis movies. I mean, he did Roger Rabbit, Back to the Future, or he did Hook. He is one of the greatest of all time.
Yeah, most recently you'd even know him from doing The Mandalorian, stuff like that. He worked on that. And he just, that literally was how I reacted. I got so used to seeing his name pop up. It was the first name I could ever recall remembering as that spot, even caring what that spot was. No offense to anybody else, but it was just Dean Cundy's name would pop up, and it was just I knew to look for it to look cool. And it was just, and I would literally do that at my house alone, just Dean Cundy, you son of a bitch. You did it again, Dean. I just got used to it. And it happens so much. Even my wife now, if Dean Cundy's name pops up, she's like, that son of a bitch.
My wife does it too. When we were watching Halloween the other day and his name popped up, she goes, that son of a bitch.
You told me that story and we were getting ready for bed and I was laughing reading your text message about it. And Jennifer was standing there. She's like, what are you laughing at? And I was like, Justin was just telling me they were watching this movie and Dean Cundy's name popped up. She goes, that son of a bitch.
It's just become a thing. But he deserves it because, like I said, he is one of the greatest cinematographers of all time. And he's a guy who many Carpenter fans consider to be sort of the co-author of his visual soul because, you associate John Carpenter movies, especially his early run of movies, with how they look visually, with the cinematography. And Dean Cundy is the guy who helped define the look of those films. He is responsible for that, but it all started here with Halloween. Now, by the time that he had landed the job on Halloween, Cundy was already a veteran of the low budget trenches. He'd done maybe a dozen movies by this point. He'd spent most of the early 70s cutting his teeth on grindhouse exploitation movies with titles like The Witch Who Came from the Sea and Satan's Cheerleaders, movies where the titles were probably much better than the actual movies themselves.
Yeah, well, let's get ready because I got to talk about our boy here for a second. Just because it's not just even in cinematography. He started off doing makeup. In fact, he was doing it as far when he was in school. He says he was a huge Magic fan, and so he got really interested in tricks and that sort of thing. But the other thing was movie makeup. It's funny. He's a god of cinema, but he actually has a similar start also, just like John Carpenter, talking about how his mom would take him to the movies and became kind of obsessed with how they look and how some looked fancy and expensive and some looked really cheap. And he just became enthralled by what went into making what happened on screen happen. And so he would do like makeup effects for like high school productions and things like that. And it ended up he would go into UCLA film school, and he started working there. And this was in 1969. And one of his buddies, a guy named Bruce Clark, got a directing job working for. He said he had convinced. What kind of series would this be if we didn't mention this name at least once? He convinced B-movie king Roger Corman to give him the job. And so Bruce Clark was going to be directing this movie, and Cundy says immediately, he was like, okay, I want to help. I want to learn to do cinematography. And he said his buddy was like, well, we already got Bob Eberlein, who's another famous DP now. But he's like, but if you want to do like makeup or something, like we could give you a shot there. Well, lucky for them and him, he knew how to do that. And so he ended up working on this film, Naked Angels. Now, Roger Corman liked working with him so much that he invited him on to another movie that he was directing. And then Cundy it seems like he would be off to the races. He said he thought, this is just how Hollywood works. Like, I went to school and now I do movies. And he said, but after that Roger Corman movie that he directed, he said that it kind of stopped. He was like, no, that's not how that works. And so he started just taking like any job he could get. And it's easy to think that this motherfucking badass just started off being the biggest swinging dick to ever operate a camera. And while he did want that job, he knew that wasn't something anybody was just going to hand to him and trust him to do right away. So again, just like our boy John Carpenter, when we talked about him last week, or on Assault on Precinct 13, he was taking any job that he could, from more makeup work to picking up editing to he worked as a lighting guy. He was a gaffer. In fact, he was supposed to be a gaffer on this movie called Black Shampoo, which was directed by Graydon Clark. Well, one day on the set, as they're getting ready to start shooting, Graydon Clark comes up to him and says, listen, motherfucker, the cinematographer for this movie got into a car accident. We need some big fucking badass to come in here and shoot the shit out of this. And so we need it to be you. He probably didn't say it exactly like that. It was something like that. But
similar,
anyway,
yeah, that's a paraphrase.
So the visual genius behind Halloween, Jurassic Park, Back to the Future, he got his first camera job because some poor bastard got into a car crash on the set, right off the set of Black Shampoo.
Wow.
They were like, the camera guy's bleeding out in an ambulance. Do you know how to push record? So really great Hollywood origin story. But anyway, but that was basically it. He did it for a day, kind of got used to it. He said they saw what he had done and they were like, okay, this looks good. So can you just do it again tomorrow? And it just kept happening. And then all of a sudden, the biggest, baddest son of a bitch cinematographer ever was born. Of course, he played it cool. They were like, are you good with doing this? And he was like, yes, I'll do whatever I need to do to help out. While inside his mind, he's probably thinking like, of course, motherfucker, I was born to do this. But anyway, he said that Graydon Clark was so taken aback by his interest in cinematography. And he said that the one thing that helped was that like Dean was obsessed with doing it right, and said that he would constantly be like, do you think it looks better here? Or what if we lit it this way? What if we did it this way? And he said in these low budget movies, the thing that impressed Graydon was like, he just fell in love. He's like, there's somebody else here that's interested in making sure this looks as amazing as possible, like I am. And so he said that's how he got recommended to the next job. And the next job, his reputation just started to grow.
Yeah. Wow. Well, and working on these little shoestring productions, like he got his start on, this taught Cundy that vital skill where, like, he knew how to make a movie look like it cost 10 times more than it actually did. And that's probably why these guys were gravitating towards him, because he cared about it and he had the skill. He became the master of low-key lighting, which is where you use deep shadows and strategic pools of light to hide the seams of a cheap film set, while creating something that looked genuinely rich and cinematic, but you're also kind of like hiding the stuff that looks shitty, basically. But Cundy's real genius, I think, is in his use of color. You can see that all through the films he worked on with John Carpenter. He loves to sandwich his scenes. This happens a lot in this movie. He loves to sandwich his scenes between different color temperatures. You've got cold blue moonlight for the nighttime exteriors, warm orange tungsten for the interiors. It's a technique that creates a sort of subconscious tug of war in the audience. The warm light reads as safety and home. The blue light reads as the outside, the unknown. And at a certain point in this film, once you recognize that he's doing that, then you notice that in the final act, the blue light seems to permeate the home. Like when Laurie's in the house running from Michael, it feels as if the outside unknown has invaded the safety of this suburban home.
So what you're basically saying is that son of a bitch, Dean Cundey, knew the assignment and he nailed it, is what happened.
He does it every time, Gary.
You did it again, Dean. Actually, just to back up for a second to more of the history of this thing, we talked about, I mentioned the Graydon Clark and him making the movies with Dean Cundey. Well, the important part to know about that I should say, is another person that worked with Graydon Clark, who he liked to use a lot in his film, was his script supervisor, by the name of Deborah motherfucking Hill.
Whoa, what?
Yeah, so turns out Deborah Hill recognizes badass boss bitch energy just as much as anybody else, because she too is a badass boss bitch. And so she took notice of our boy Dean and went up to him one day and was like, hey, I know somebody who's working on another movie about this masked guy stalking babysitters. Are you interested in maybe coming and trying something out over there? And he said he took a second because he's from because the director was from USC and Dean Cundey's from UCLA, and that's the rival. So
wow.
Yeah, but he was always interested in trying something new and seeing. I don't know. He said that Deborah kind of convinced him that this guy is very interested in making sure a movie looks good. And he cares about that part as much as you do. And so Dean's like, fine, I'll do it. I'll go meet him. So Cundey says the second he met Carpenter's like, let's watch a movie together. And he said he remembers he had a 3/4 inch videotape machine and a bunch of movies, and they picked one out. It was the 1951 The Thing. Yeah. And so he said Carpenter turned to him as they hit play and said, I've always really liked this movie. Let's look at it together. And he says, and then they started watching it and they just talked throughout the whole movie. They talked about like the shots, the way a certain scene was lit, just different ideas for how a movie should look. And he said that they had such a good time together. At the end, he was finally like, okay, I want to do this with you. And he said, Carpenter looked at him. And Carpenter looked at him and said, okay, let's give this a try.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, I love, that's a great story. I hadn't heard that story, but it makes sense because like they talk about how when they met, they spoke the same visual language. And Cundey, you know, that excited him because he'd been working on these little exploitation movies where maybe that's not always the case, where the director cares about the visuals, but now he finally was able to showcase his skills with a really visually minded director, someone where the visuals were a major focus of his films. And he and Carpenter both loved that wide frame Panavision look of classic Hollywood, like those old John Ford Westerns, those old Howard Hawks films. And Cundey knew exactly how to give Halloween a big movie feel on an indie budget. That was his specialty. It was Cundey who figured out how to light the night scenes so that they felt genuinely pitch black and terrifying, yet still retained enough blue-hued clarity for the shape to emerge from the darkness.
Yeah, and just to nail down that point, just how much the shape is terrifying. So absolutely terrifying that the first time I saw this movie at 8 years old, which was probably too young, it gave me nightmares for a year. And a lot of that relies completely on Dean motherfucking Cundey and the way that he shot this movie. Like Tommy Lee Wallace, who he constantly reminds people in interviews and convinces and says in the interviews, like, that Captain Kirk mask was painted fish belly white, is his exact words. He says, no features whatsoever. He was like, the deep hollow black pits for eyes, the terrifying cheap shadows, those are 100% an optical illusion that Dean Cundey created with his lighting. Because, I mean, it's how the way he talks about it, like, he gives Dean props for it. It's just like you're basically like a step away from Michael Myers looking like some crackhead mime but
Wow.
Dean Cundey makes it look like he's
look at
from hell.
Look at the later Halloween movies for proof.
Right. That's a good point. Yeah, because it's something to make that mask work. And and I mean, and of course the big one is that like iconic reveal where the shape, like where 100 movies have tried to do this, so that the shape comes out of the pitch black darkness, like he just materializes behind Laurie in the hallway,
where he's in the closet, or he's in the dark closet. Yeah, it's my favorite. It's my favorite shot in the movie, honestly. And I did see an interview where Cundey talked about how he did that. Have you seen that?
Well, he said he just wired like a cheap dimmer switch to a light.
Yeah,
right?
like a pin light. Yeah.
Yeah, it just slowly turned it up so that the mask just seems to come out of nothingness.
Mm-hmm.
It's a fucking badass shot.
It's so good because it's almost like your eyes are adjusting to the darkness, and
that's like what he was going for. Is like your eyes are slowly adjusting to like he's been there the whole time or whatever. And
he just adjusted the light on it and dimmed it up enough to where the camera started catching the light coming off of it. And it's like, to this day, I've never seen anyone else be able to do that.
Yeah, not like him.
No.
It's so good. And it's so fucking badass shot from a fucking badass. I gotta say, I feel like I say it's worth mentioning a lot, but and I say this a lot, but here is another example of a really solid pick from Deborah Hill. This movie would not happen without Deborah Hill. Dean Cundey is on this movie because of Deborah Hill. So let's be clear on that. She needs the credit for a lot of this.
And then subsequently on the next like several John Carpenter movies, all the best looking ones of his filmography. So, I mean, you could say John Carpenter may not have the career that he had without Deborah Hill. I think that's safe to say.
She's so smart, and not just because Dean Cundey's the biggest, baddest boss bitch cinematographer that ever fucking lived in the whole fucking universe, but also because, he had been doing this for a minute, and he actually, for whatever reason, I couldn't really find out, he owned all of his shit. So, like, he had the movie van and that I mentioned before, and she loved that about him. She loved what he was able to do and how much he cared. And he's bringing his own stuff into this thing. So, like strategic as hell is, I guess, what I'm trying to get at as far as working with the budget and what they've got here. They're really making something happen. And it's the intelligence and strategy of like, oh, God bless you, Deborah Hill, because this is perfect.
Legend. Yeah. So not only would Halloween be the beginning of one of the greatest director-cinematographer partnerships in genre cinema, period, but it was also one of the first major showcases for a brand new piece of technology that would change the way that movies look.
You did it again, Dean!
Everyone's probably heard of the Steadicam, which at this time had just made waves in films like Rocky and Bound for Glory. The Shining would famously use it a couple years later, but around the time that was starting to gain kind of popularity, Panavision had developed its own competing version, and they called it the Panaglide. Now, the Panaglide, just like the Steadicam, was a camera stabilization rig that allowed the operator to move smoothly through a space without the need for heavy, clunky dolly tracks, or move through spaces where you literally couldn't put a dolly track. So for a low-budget production like this, it was a godsend because it meant that Carpenter could shoot several pages of his script in a single take. So instead of stopping for a couple of hours to reset the dolly tracks and lighting for 5 different coverage shots, they just walked the camera through the whole scene. So on a 3-week shoot, every minute counts. And also as far as why they went with the Panaglide over the Steadicam, I think because they were renting cameras from Panavision, they were able to bundle the Panaglide in together and save a little bit of money, which made it a little bit cheaper than the Steadicam would have been. Plus, Steadicam operators, you had to have like a specialized person to operate the Steadicam, had to pay them extra. They didn't have to do that with the Panaglide. They could just learn to use it on their own. And they wasted no time in putting this new rig to work. On day 1 of the shoot, the crew hit the streets of Pasadena to establish the daytime world of Haddonfield. On that first day, they knocked out the walk and talk sequences of the girls heading home. They did Laurie's first encounter with Tommy Doyle, and they did that eerie POV shot looking out of the Myers house where it's kind of over Michael's shoulder, when Laurie drops off the key. They also captured the footage of Laurie singing her made-up little song before moving to the high school to finish out the day. So they did a lot in one day. That's a lot of stuff to shoot in a single day.
Yeah, like really important stuff too.
Yeah, stuff like establishing stuff. That little song that she sings, by the way, I looked up some information about that because I was curious where it came from, because it's not like a known song. The how does it go?
I wish I had you all alone.
That's the one.
Just the two of us.
So Carpenter and Curtis, they actually improvised that song on the spot on the day that they were shooting that, and they did it because they didn't want to pay licensing fees for a more well-known song. Because they, once again, they didn't have the money in the budget to license a bunch of songs. They'd use that part of the budget for Don't Fear the Reaper, I think. So they're like, that's the one we can afford. So anything else we're just going to have to make up. So there's another song that you hear in the car that sounds like a 50s rock and roll tune. I think it's when Laurie's in her house. You hear it coming off the radio. And that song was performed by the Coupe de Villes, who you've already mentioned, but the Coupe de Villes were John Carpenter, Nick Castle, and Tommy Lee Wallace. They recorded a handful of songs, kind of just generic rock songs that they specifically recorded them so that they could use them in the movie and not have to pay for any other licensing fees. Because I don't know if the Coupe de Villes even existed before this movie. I mean, I think they may have been created as a band for Halloween.
Well, them playing at the rap party makes me feel like they've had done something together before this. Now, I don't know like how much they recorded. The music in this, if the credits, is credited to the Bowling Green Philharmonic Orchestra.
Well, that's for John Carpenter's score.
Yeah,
that's just him. Yeah, so I think that's just him being cheeky.
Another stupid little fun fact. I feel like Paul Blart every time I say this. Like, fun fact for you: that song too in 2018 Halloween. That version, when the kid is with his dad and they drive up and find the crash bus where Michael has escaped, that song is playing on the radio.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I wish I had you all alone. I think it's that one. It was not Paul. I'm pretty sure it's I wish I had you all alone is like on the radio as a real song.
Oh, fun. Well, going back to the Panaglide, I went on a little side quest there. Going back to the Panaglide, Carpenter didn't want to just use it for these smooth shots of people walking down the street. He wanted to use it to put the audience inside the head of his monster. And of course, that brings us to Halloween's iconic opening scene. So the film opens with what I think is one of cinema's great sustained point of view sequences. We start outside of a house in 1963. We're looking through a set of eyes, the eyes of a voyeur. He's watching. We watch a teenage girl and her boyfriend through a window. Then we kind of move in through the kitchen. We find a knife. You see him pick up a knife. We find a clown mask and put it over our face. And then we head upstairs. And I mean, you know what happens next, right?
The opening shot with the house, I just wanted to say too, like what I think is cool about it. Could never find if this was intentional or not, but if you want it kind of looks like a jack-o'-lantern, like just sitting.
The house itself.
Yeah. I just like the way that it looks. And in Halloween Unmasked, Amy Nicholson lays out that sequence really, really well, talking about like how confusing that would probably be to an audience at the first time seeing this, like because it's like, oh, this is fun. We're POV. We're voyeurs, you know, and then you go and then you're like seeing a teenage girl with her boyfriend through the window, like, oh, this is getting good. Like, what's going on here? And then all of a sudden it's like, now we've got a knife. This is not okay. What's going on?
You're right. The scene it's nearly 4 minutes long and it seems to be a single unbroken shot. To pull it off, Dean Cundy recruited his go-to camera operator, a guy named Ray Stella, who spent a little bit of time before the shoot learning how to use this new Panavision rig. But the tech was so new. I mean, Halloween was the fourth film, I think, to use it. They basically had to figure out how to use it by the seat of their pants once the shoot began. It's a lot of on the job training. But he had to kind of get it nailed down through rehearsals because when they came to film the scene, he had to navigate a veritable obstacle course, often having to walk backwards and through narrow doorways, all without tripping on crew members who were ducked behind sofas. They were flattened against walls, frantically moving lights and props out of the camera's frame. It was like this whole choreographed thing going on off camera that you can't see. It's sort of insane to think about everything they had to do to pull that scene off, because they're not filming on like a movie set where they can slide walls out of the way. They're filming in like an actual house. And then when the camera finally moves back outside and the mask is pulled away to reveal a 6-year-old boy holding a bloody kitchen knife, the kitchen breaks. And it's a pretty devastating reveal. And it's one that works. I mean, imagine seeing this the first time you've ever seen this. You've watched this all happen. You've watched a girl get stabbed to death. And then it's revealed to be a child. And it all works, and it works so well on the audience because of what you were just talking about, right? Because we've just spent several minutes, we as the audience have just spent several minutes complicit in the act. We weren't just like watching the murder. We were the ones holding the knife.
Yeah. Well, if I'm going to keep blowing smoke, it's Deborah Hill holding the knife. So let's not forget that Michael Myers, if I'm just going to keep kissing her ass, that Michael Myers' first kill was actually Deborah Hill in a clown suit.
Well, she was the only one whose hands were small enough, I think, to look like a child's hands.
Well, and you couldn't have the kid in there because naked lady. But but anyway, she's like stalking next to Ray Stella, trying not to bump into shit, making her way through. But Dean Cuddy talks about this sequence like in high regard, like just to. And he gives a lot of credit to John Carpenter too for like wanting this to be a big part of this. This is a vision that he had for how this would work, because he mentions that a lot of people, when he talks to him in interviews or like at conventions or something, like people try to credit him as like, you're the first person or the first team to use the Panaglide. He's like, well, not the first people to use this. Like, it's been used, but this discussion with John Carpenter they had, what was intriguing about it to me was that this was the first time it's going to be used. Like, the camera is a character in the movie.
Right.
Like, it's, and I don't think I'd ever seen that before, that like it's going to become as vital as like an actor in the scene,
Yeah. That's not something that anyone had really done before. And this whole sequence, it was actually saved for the very last day of production. And it was the ultimate sort of all or nothing. We got to get this like thing because it was going to open the movie. And earlier in the day, to pull this off, the entire cast and crew worked as a DIY renovation team. So you've got, I don't know if Donald Pleasence was in there, but I know Jamie Lee Curtis has talked about being a part of this, where they had to take that abandoned, decrepit house that they had, gotten from the church and de-age it. They had to paint and wallpaper and furnish it to make it look like a pristine family home, because this takes place 15 years before. Also, I guess we should mention that because we've talked about this being a continuous 4-minute shot. It wasn't. There are multiple takes here in this shot. There are 3 or 4 different takes. Like, they shot this several times, but each take was a single continuous shot, like what we see in the film, but they then took various takes and sort of Frankensteined them together and hid the cuts to make it look like a continuous take. But every time they shot it in full. They just used different parts of each of those full shots to create the final product, if that makes sense. They spent something like 16 hours filming this. They went through, I think they said 20 takes of that Panaglide shot. They went through multiple camera operators because even though the Panaglide is relatively light, it's still strapped to your body, and it puts a toll on you. I think Dean Cuddy himself even stepped in at one point, was operating the camera. And they finally nailed the take just as the sun began to rise, and it was the absolute final beat of the entire shoot.
It's crazy. Yeah, there was always that rumor that it was one shot, all whatever. I mean, it's perfectly done. Like, you can't really tell. There's times where the mask comes on the camera or whatever.
Sure.
Where I think they do a break or something there. But now I will say, like, Sandy Johnson, who plays, I don't know why, Judith Myers.
Sandy Johnson, Playmate centerfold of 19. What year was it? She was
June 74.
Is June 74?
Yeah. I don't know why I would know that, but anyway. She does say in an interview that her part, they only did 2 takes of.
Yeah.
But she did remember that. But she said because the worst part, she was talking about like falling, once she's dead.
Yeah.
That they had rehearsed it a few times beforehand or whatever. She talks about like how, she's like, it's just a movie, but like, I'm sitting up there like waiting, and like
Naked.
the house is silent. Yeah. And she was like, but then she's like, you can hear the creaking like coming up the stairs. And she's like, you do start thinking like, shit, they're coming to kill me. Like, this is it. And one thing I love about the scene too is like, it's absolutely designed to put you with the killer, but when Michael stabs Judith, there's this bizarre moment where he stops to look at his own hand and the bloody knife, and like I always thought that was weird, even when I was young. Like I was like, what a weird scene, and it's like a weird angle, and then when you wanted to, especially back in the day, you used to be able to find like all kinds of film scholars and stuff just over analyzing that shit. Like Michael's examining his own rage, he's seeing it. But like John Carpenter, one interview, he said it best, I think. And somebody asked him about that. Or they were like, so what was the thought behind showing the hand coming down with the knife, and that kind of thing? He's like, could you think of another way to shoot it? And they're like, well, I don't know. And he's like, because I gotta go from her not being bloody to bloody. And he's like, we're trying to do all this one thing. He's like, so he says there was a definite reason why he looks at that knife and while he's plunging it into his sister. He's like, what if you were to suddenly realize that you have this problem and there's a practical solution to it? Let's see. She's sitting with no clothes on. I have the camera coming up behind her. She's still sitting there. I have someone who has, mind you, a real knife. And what I have to do is murder her right in front of you, whereas there is no possible way to do it without hurting her. So the only thing I can do is to have some blood standing by where you can't see it. And the only thing then you can do is have him look at his hand for a second while she's pouring blood on herself and pretends to be dead. So he's like, yeah. He's like, even after we shot it and I'm looking back at it later, I'm like, why would he be looking at his hand? He's like, I've got to come up with something for that. And he's like, and he said, I think even at some place I convinced myself that if somebody ever asked me that, I'm going to tell them that he's focusing in on his rage and what he's doing in this moment. But yeah, side note, somewhere in there too, I also read this unverified account that like I've seen that she poured the blood on herself. I've seen that Tommy Lee Wallace was standing by to help her get the blood on herself. I've also seen it one thing that like she didn't like the way everybody was rough with her with like the blood going on herself. So Jamie Lee Curtis was there and helped rub the blood on her body. All that happens. So do with that what you will in your own brain.
So if there is any behind the scenes footage of this, so that we can verify that.
Oh man. But yeah, oh man, Sandy Johnson, like she was, like you mentioned, Playboy Magazine's Playmate of the Month for June 74, but she did a little bit more after this, but always like the teen sex comedy thing, shit like that. Then she kind of just disappeared, but over the last few years, she started popping up again. So good for her. She's Judith Meyer. She deserves some love. She has a website. It's unicornsandij.com.
Unicornsandij.com.
Yep, and you can go and get signed stuff and like a tombstone and all kinds of stuff.
That's cool. Well, I think this is a good time to wrap up this episode. Next time on Cinema Shock, we will see what happened when John Carpenter unleashed Halloween onto the world and how this scrappy, unlikely little film became a worldwide phenomenon that birthed one of cinema's most iconic monsters. That'll be next time on part 3 of Halloween. This is the first time we've ever done a 3-parter. But if any, I think it is. Yeah, we probably should have done some in the past, but
listeners probably wish we would have.
This is the first time we have. But if any movie's deserving of it, I think it's Halloween, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the most iconic of all time, and definitely so much lore and so much to talk about. I mean, we're digging in, now getting into the filming and our thoughts on the actual like movie itself.
Yeah, we still got our analysis to talk about, and we got a lot of stuff to talk about still. So we'll do that on the next episode. If you want to hear the whole thing, like we always say, head to cinemashock.net/plus. Join Cinema Shock Plus. You'll get the full uncut episode with a bunch of bonus stuff included as well. You'll hear all 3 parts of Halloween all in one go. And you'll be helping support the show and supporting all the research and all the hard work we put into it, which we really appreciate. We appreciate everyone who does that. There's all kinds of other perks on there too, Discord access and merch discounts and the ability to vote on new releases that me and Gary talk about, all kinds of fun benefits. And it's pretty inexpensive. So $5 a month, $3 a month really gets you to some of those, but $5 a month gets you the good stuff. $10 a month, you get to look at our ugly mugs. So
yeah, $20
Really?
a month. I'll come to your house and film a POV shot all the way up to your bedroom.
he'll do it. Well, that's it for this week. Gary, where can you be found on the internet for our listeners?
At This Is Gary Horde.
And I am at Justin_Bishop. The show is at Cinema_Shock on most of the old social media things. CinemaShock.net is our hub for all things Cinema Shock, including merch, episodes, links to Discord, links to our social media, all kinds of stuff on there. And I guess until next time,
may the wings of liberty never lose a feather.
and be excellent to each other.